Dexter left fans with unsolved mysteries, unfinished arcs, deaths we never saw, questions that still divide the fanbase. Today, we're diving into the darkest secrets of the Dexter universe and taking a look at some of the most interesting mysteries. And it all starts with what destroyed Dokes. James Dokes was dedicated to taking down Dexter. Even before he could prove that Dexter was a killer, Dokes always knew there was something wrong with him, and he was pretty sure whatever it was criminal. Dokes was rude to Dexter pretty much all the time. He wanted it to be known that he didn't like him or trust him. And as the Ice Truck Killer investigation reached a head, Dokes was certain that Dexter had more to do with it than he let on. He started telling Dexter after work and going through his office to find clues. Over time, Dokes' outward hostility towards Dexter forced him to fight back. The duel started with Dexter making Dokes look incompetent at work and ended with Dokes being suspended after stalking Dexter and attacking him in the middle of the office. Dokes was put on unpaid administrative leave, and an internal affairs investigation into his conduct was opened. It may have seemed that Dexter had finally gotten the upper hand, but this would turn out to be a huge mistake. Dokes was obviously pissed about the suspension, and that anger only fueled his drive to unravel Dexter's secrets. And the suspension left him with plenty of time to dig deeper into whatever Dexter was hiding. He broke into Dexter's house and searched the place so thoroughly that he found Dexter's blood slides. The department was in the middle of investigating the Bay Harbor butcher, and it was already known that the perpetrator was a member of the Miami Metro Homicide Department. The blood slides all but confirmed that Dexter was the butcher. Dokes could have called up Maria or Lundy right then and there. He could have exposed Dexter as being some sort of sadistic creep, even if he wasn't the butcher. He would have to come up with a pretty clever explanation for how he obtained the slides, because it's not like he had a search warrant, but he would have had to do that at any point that he turned them over to the FBI. No, instead of immediately turning them over or even letting LaGuerta in on what he found so she could help, he decided to fly to Haiti to have an old friend from the military examine them. Before he could arrange all of that, the FBI found the slides in his car, assumed they were his trophies, and began a manhunt to bring him in for the butcher's crimes. By having the blood slides in his possession, but not turning them into police, Dokes made the frame job Dexter was setting up all the more plausible, and even in death, Dokes was smeared as the Bay Harbor Butcher by pretty much everyone who knew about the case. It is truly a mystery why Dokes thought he needed to get the blood slides examined before turning them over to the FBI, when the Bureau definitely would have done that on their own, and if he really just had to. It's unclear why he had to go all the way to Haiti to do so, instead of working with the one person who knew he was innocent and would do anything to prove it, Maria LaGuerta. Dokes may have grazed Dexter's thigh when he shot at him when they struggled on the pier, but he shot himself in the foot when he failed to handle the blood slide discovery appropriately. Had he done so, he may have lived, and Dexter would have finally faced the music for his crimes. A lesser explored mystery of the series is the mystery of Rita's first husband. As we know, Rita was married to the abusive drug addict Paul Bennett for years before she started dating Dexter. Together, Rita and Paul had 2 children together, Astor and Cody, but even that wasn't enough to convince Paul to treat Rita better. Oftentimes, the children witnessed him abusing their mother, and it would have continued if Paul hadn't gotten locked up again, courtesy of Dexter, and died in prison. After his death, Rita got pregnant, and then they got engaged, prompting Rita's mother to send a congratulations card with a note saying that she hoped the 3rd one is the charm. Rita lied to Dexter and tried to make it seem as if her mother was referring to her 3rd child, the soon-to-be-born Harrison, but Dexter knew she wasn't telling the truth. He didn't know why she would lie about having another husband, and soon he was doing background checks to figure out what was going on. He discovered that she had been married to a man named John Allen Ackerman before meeting Paul, and they had married when she was still very young. It still wasn't clear why she lied about it. What was she hiding? Why would she be so ashamed of the marriage? Did she do something criminal while she was with John? Did she cheat on John with Paul? Is her oldest child, Astor, actually John's daughter, not Paul's? The marriage certificate, as shown on screen in season 3, has errors in both the birth years for Rita and John, as well as the year they got married. Was the document illegitimate in some way? Perhaps forged or filled out incorrectly on purpose to cover something up? The entire storyline dies out when Dexter decided that he wanted to respect Rita's choice to keep parts of her past to herself. Given his history, he could definitely understand why someone might want to do that. He didn't tell her that he knew she lied, and he never broached the topic again, leaving the mystery alive to swirl around in fan forums forever. Who was John Allen Ackerman, and why does his first wife need so badly to distance herself from him? We will never know. Special Agent Frank Lundy was described as a rock star in his field. He was a highly seasoned FBI agent with shrewd detective skills that already helped him capture plenty of killers before he came to Miami Metro to hunt the Trinity Killer. In fact, Lundy was the only person in the FBI who even believed the Trinity Killer was real. No one else believed that his kills were connected. They didn't seem to buy Frank's theory about the pattern repeating in cities all over the country for decades. Serial killers usually kill in the same area the entire time they are active, but if Frank's theory was true, it would mean that an unknown killer was traveling all around visiting seemingly random cities and killing completely random people, with 2 out of every 3 of the murders looking like very obvious suicides. And how would someone manage to keep that up for decades? But that is exactly what Trinity was doing, and exactly how he got away with it for so long, and Frank Lundy knew that. It would have been easy to overlook, and it's difficult to put it all together, but Lundy not only managed to figure out the connections, but also predicted when and where Trinity was likely to strike next. He really was an impeccable detective, with the only piece of the puzzle that he missed was the fact that Trinity's cycle included 4 kills, not 3. Trinity was also responsible for the disappearances of young boys in each of those cities as well, but he likely would have figured that out if he had lived long enough to finish his investigation and bring Arthur Mitchell to justice. One of the clearest indications that Frank Lundy basically had superhuman detective skills is shown when he bumps into Arthur by mistake one day while scoping out the place he figured would be the next crime scene. Arthur dropped his keys when they ran into each other, and Lundy stopped him to return them to him. In that brief moment, he looked into Trinity's eyes and immediately became suspicious of him. He took an audio note to look into Arthur later, and just like that, he was 1 degree removed from finally solving hundreds of murders dating all the way back to the 70s. Lundy's abilities were second to none, and unfortunately, that would be why he was killed by Trinity's insane daughter, Christine Hill. But remember the case he was working on the first time he came to Miami? That's right, he was there to help hunt down the Bay Harbor Butcher. After Dexter's underwater graveyard was discovered by deep sea divers, the FBI sent Lundy to Florida to handle the case. Dexter was an incredibly clean and efficient killer, so physical evidence was scarce. But there was plenty of circumstantial evidence, like the algae that grew on the bags and bodies of the victims, indicating the marina the killer likely docked his boat. They were also able to narrow down when the victims were killed based on their different rates of decomposition and the dates that they were last seen alive. That meant that anyone they investigated had to be in Miami on specific days to be a viable suspect. And most importantly, they realized that the killer checked a car out of the department's motor pool to abduct one of the victims before returning it the next day. And even though they didn't have a record of people who used the motor pool, Lundy knew that only a member of the homicide department could have done that, meaning the killer was one of them. He and his task force were able to get all of that in a relatively short time, and knowing that the butcher was in the department should have certainly led Lundy right to Dexter. After all Lundy had to do was look at Arthur Mitchell once to know that he was probably relevant to his investigation into the Trinity Killer. He was around Dexter constantly while he hunted for the butcher. He even poked and prodded in a way that indicated he might suspect Dexter, but ultimately he didn't get that same sense from him. He seemed to perfectly outline the likely quirks of the butcher, but didn't notice Dexter had most of those himself. He also recognized that Dexter, a highly trained and meticulous blood spatter analyst with a near perfect track record, just so happened to mess up the blood work on a couple of cases related to the butcher's victims. What a coincidence, right? Lundy pressed Dexter about it and didn't seem to even buy his excuse, but then he just let it go. Finding the blood slides in Dokes' car was a pretty damning piece of evidence for him, but Lundy knew that he and Dexter didn't get along, and he knew that for some of the murders, there was no way that Dokes could have done them because he was on special assignment with the military and nowhere near Miami when the victims disappeared. He was willing to look into some of the facts because Maria insisted, but he still never zeroed in on Dexter, the only other person who could have done it and stood to benefit the most by framing and killing Dokes. All of these inconsistencies, coincidences, and unanswered questions, and for some reason, Special Agent Rockstar Frank Lundy just packed up and moved on from the case entirely. It's baffling how or why his skills, instincts, and dedication were so much flimsier when it came to hunting the Bay Harbor Butcher when compared to every other killer he ever caught. It's so strange that it has left so many fans speculating whether or not Lundy knew it was Dexter the whole time, but didn't want to catch the Butcher, because on some level, he agreed with the elimination of killers, even if it was done outside of the law. But since Lundy was killed off in season 4, it looks like this is a mystery of the show that will never be solved. Another death that came too soon in season 4 was the death of Rita Morgan. Lundy wasn't the only one hunting the Trinity killer. Dexter was also very interested in getting Trinity, and he had gone to pretty elaborate means to make that happen. Dexter started following Trinity and then used the alias Kyle Butler to get closer to him during his vetting process. He learned more about Trinity than he expected after discovering that he had a family, that he abused and controlled them all, and that his kill ritual actually involved 4 murders, the first being the kidnapping of a young boy he would later bury alive. Dexter interfered with Trinity's cycle to stop him from killing a young boy, and that exposure infuriated Trinity and set him after Dexter. After learning Dexter's true identity, Trinity found his real address, broke in, and killed Rita while Dexter wasn't there. Soon after, Dexter finally got Trinity on his kill table, but the damage was already done. Dexter meant to get his entire family out of the house until he could take care of Trinity to protect them from him, but it didn't pan out. He sent Aster and Cody to stay with their grandparents in Orlando for a few days when they were all set to enjoy a trip to Disney World. As for Rita and Harrison, he tried to send them to the Florida Keys as a late and impromptu honeymoon, planning to join them the next day after he killed Arthur. But Rita forgot her ID and returned home to get it for the airport. That is where Trinity attacked and killed her before Dexter finally tracked him down and managed to take him out. Dexter discovering Rita's body was arguably the most devastating moment of the entire series, and no one saw it coming. But what was almost as difficult to watch was the scene where Dexter broke the news to the kids and their grandparents after they returned from Orlando. The kids were in disbelief that their mother was dead, and Aster was angry with Dexter for not keeping her safe. She just didn't know how righteous her anger really was. Trinity may have been the killer, but Rita's death was Dexter's fault. Aster didn't want to live with Dexter anymore and insisted that she and her brother Cody move in with their grandparents permanently to be away from him. They couldn't take Harrison, of course, but Aster's declaration that she wanted to move to Orlando settled the matter for her and Cody. After that episode, Aster and Cody are only ever seen 2 more times for the rest of the series. That includes the remainder of the original series, New Blood and Resurrection. It's like they just disappeared. Aster was shown to have begun rebelling and drinking at a young age, but it's never revisited or fleshed out. Did she continue to decline? How did Cody adjust to life without his mother? How did they learn about Deb's death? How did they handle it? Did they care that Dexter was pronounced dead after Hurricane Laura? Did they wonder where their brother Harrison was? After it's proven that Dexter was actually still alive, thanks to Batista correcting all the records, were they angry with him for faking his death? We know that Harrison ended up all alone when Hannah died in Argentina, and she was much younger than Paul's parents. Did they live long enough to care for Aster and Cody until they were old enough to move out? Their entire story arc is a dead end, and an abrupt one. Dexter had responsibilities as a stepfather, whether they stayed in Orlando or not, but for some reason, the kids never came up again. Not even Deb or Dexter's friends ever mentioned them. By now, the franchise is so far removed from Aster and Cody that it's unlikely that any of these questions will ever be answered. In the books, they become killers themselves, but as far as the show is concerned, their fates are some of the biggest mysteries it ever created. Hannah McKay's criminal methods were defined by subtlety, patience, and a deadly precision. Unlike many killers in Dexter, she had no interest in theatrics or messages. Her killings were done quietly and nearly impossible to trace. Her preferred method of using plant-based poisons allowed her to eliminate partners, controlling figures, and perceived threats without leaving behind any obvious signs of foul play. Hannah's deep knowledge of toxic plants meant she could calibrate exact doses. and manipulate her victims' symptoms by selecting poisons that mimicked natural causes or medical complications. She rarely acted impulsively. Instead, she observed, bonded with her targets, and struck when suspicion was least likely. Her MO hinged on her ability to appear unassuming. She disarmed people with charm and feigned vulnerability, making her attacks look like random, inevitable accidents rather than cold-blooded murder. This precision was full-on display during her escape from custody. Facing a new murder charge for the death of Sal Price, Hannah knew that she couldn't brute force to get free. She hated the confinement of prison with a passion, so much so that she tells Dexter she would have preferred he kill her than turn her in. So she deployed one of the only tools she fully had in her control, her mastery of toxins. By ingesting a carefully measured compound, she self-induced a seizure severe enough to trigger a medical emergency that would divert her to a hospital, but mild enough not to cause her any long-term harm. And the plan worked flawlessly. The guards, untrained to question medical episodes, treated her as a patient instead of a prisoner. Once transferred to the hospital, where security was looser and procedures were more chaotic, Hannah escaped her handcuffs and got away. It was a textbook example of her MO. She was able to use non-lethal drugs, mind tricks, and perfect timing to slip through the cracks while no one noticed. After escaping to Argentina with Harrison, Hannah lived under the radar. She had to if she wanted to avoid being rearrested and tried for her crimes, but 10 years later, Harrison revealed that she died of pancreatic cancer, leaving him effectively orphaned. On the surface, it was a tragic but plausible end. After all, pancreatic cancer is highly aggressive and difficult to detect early, but the circumstances contain enough ambiguity to raise the possibility that Hannah staged her own death to disappear permanently. First, there were no verifiable medical records shared publicly. No one ever confirmed that she was dead. There was only a secondhand report that came through a traumatized Harrison, who wouldn't have even thought to look too closely into the veracity of her illness. The lack of any confirmation or reports of her death stands out for someone who was wanted internationally. Second, Hannah had every reason to fake her death. With Dexter presumed dead and law enforcement still able to connect her to multiple murders, she lived in a constant risk of exposure. Faking a terminal illness would give her a clean slate. Not unlike what Dexter's done. She would appear more sympathetic. Authorities would close the cases into her, and there would be enough finality that no one would continue searching for her. Lastly, disappearing via medical death aligns perfectly with her skill set. Again, Hannah understood how to manipulate symptoms and toxins perfectly, and she could easily have used slow-acting compounds to mimic the physical decline that comes from cancer. Things like weight loss, jaundice, fatigue, and more, while keeping herself alive by never overdosing. And she is no stranger to manipulating people and even the system more broadly. She could have bribed or tricked local officials to quietly produce a convincing death certificate if necessary. Whether Hannah truly died in Argentina or simply slipped into a new identity is unclear. Because of her dicey past and the fact that it happened off screen, her death carries the weight of quite a few unanswered questions, and definitely could have been yet another clever ruse to help her remain free at any and all costs. The fact is that Hannah has the incredibly useful ability to use nature itself to erase her tracks, possibly in more ways than one. Harry Morgan's death has long been framed as a tragic suicide that he was driven to by guilt, but the actual circumstances are a bit murkier. Several details across Dexter's universe suggest that Harry's death may not have been self-inflicted at all. In fact, there are some pretty compelling reasons to consider that Harry might have been murdered, and the one suspect that stands out above the rest is the monster he helped create himself, Brian Moser. The official story is simple enough. After witnessing Dexter's first kill, Harry couldn't handle the weight of what he had molded his son into and overdosed on his heart medication to kill himself. It's clean, tragic, and convenient for the narrative. But the deeper you look, the more the pieces fail to align. Harry had built his entire adult life around protecting Dexter and Deb and establishing a moral structure that, no matter how flawed, he believed would keep them safe. For Harry to abruptly abandon his children through suicide feels inconsistent with his lifelong pattern of feeling responsible for them. Even when morally compromised, Harry was fiercely loyal, and he rarely walked away from things that he felt obligated to take care of. If anything, discovering Dexter's kill would have pushed Harry even deeper into his protective role, not completely out of it in the worst way. That brings us to Brian Moser, Dexter's biological biological brother, and a man with a deep, festering hatred for Harry Morgan. Brian blamed Harry for separating him from his brother after the shipping container tragedy. He knew that Harry was having an affair with his mother while she worked for the police as a CI. He hated Harry for leaving him to rot in the foster system while Dexter was raised in a loving home. That resentment shaped Brian's entire worldview. It all just fueled his obsession with Dexter. Most importantly, it positioned Harry as the root of his lifelong suffering. Brian killed people for less, and he had all the motive he'd need to kill Harry. But the biggest clue that he may have been responsible for Harry's death is that we know he had a perfected method to get away with it. Brian Moser knew exactly how to make his murders resemble natural deaths. He almost certainly killed Joe Driscoll, the man known to be Dexter's biological father. On top of that, Brian definitely murdered Joe's elderly neighbor to avoid any loose ends after he realized that she recognized him as the TV repairman. He probably made that look natural as well, but these weren't accidents. They were part of Brian's plan to get closer and closer to Dexter till his brother remembered him and agreed to join him in some sort of crazy criminal lifestyle, no consequences. He used common drugs to produce the outward signs of heart failure, leaving no immediate indication of homicide, and staged Joe's death to look like a heart attack. And what did Harry Morgan's death look like? A heart attack brought on by medication overdose, which is conveniently indistinguishable from the effects Brian had already been proven capable of recreating himself. Brian also had opportunity. After Brian killed the social worker who placed him in the foster system and got away with it, Harry thought he had gotten Brian to back off of him and his family for Dexter's sake. But given the fact that Brian was nuts and hated Harry's connection to Dexter and definitely wanted revenge against the man who tore his family apart, this would have been the perfect way to strike. If Harry's death didn't look like an accident and Dexter ever found out that he was responsible, Brian knew that he would never forgive him. But he needed Harry out of the way if he was ever going to actually manipulate Dexter into abandoning his code and joining him on the dark side. And Brian's determined and surgical approach to getting what he wanted makes it entirely possible that he orchestrated Harry's death to appear self-inflicted, knowing how easily authorities would accept the suicide narrative. This doesn't confirm that Brian murdered Harry, but the combination of his hatred, his severe and untreated mental illnesses, and the death patterns he replicated in other parts of his plan make it seem more and more likely. You add in the inconsistency of Harry's personality, allowing him to abandon his children, and it all makes Harry's suicide appear way less certain than the show initially suggests. Harry may not have taken his own life. He may have been silenced by the very monster he forgot he even made. But for now, it's all still shrouded in mystery. Maybe the upcoming seasons of Dexter Resurrection will put some of these mysteries to bed, but for now, they are all still leaving us as stumped as we are hooked. Are there any mysteries we missed? Drop your questions and theories in the comments. And if you liked this breakdown, check out our breakdown of the biggest plot holes in Dexter so far. Thanks for watching, and remember to slash that subscribe button on your way out.